Water, there's a drive for water to then dilute the blood. Water moves towards the blood. But if you drink a more concentrated beverage than the blood, like that hypertonic sports drink, that over concentrated sports drink or soda or juice, water will move from inside the bloodstream into the gut, which, as I mentioned before, is actually dehydrating. I have seen so many athletes come to me for nutrition consultations that have just horrible GI issues, can't figure it out. And generally, there's two things. One, are they using a straw, so consuming air when they're drinking? And number two, concentrated sports drinks. So those are typically the two most common culprits. And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of athletes, and those are absolutely the most popular reasons why. The inclusion of electrolytes and glucose in the beverage of your sports drink, it actually promotes the retention of fluids. So we want to retain our fluids, not just pee them out. We want to make sure that they're utilized well. And when you add a little sugar with the sodium, you can actually pull a greater amount of water across the small intestines, optimizing water absorption. So this is why even when we do a short workout, we still want water, electrolytes, and sugar, because we can then take more water across the small intestines to help us be better hydrated. And whenever we take in a sports drink during a workout, it's not just that one workout, but we're actually setting ourselves up for the next workout as well. So now I'll go into a few examples of how to hydrate. And these are just general examples, kind of a starting place. And I always recommend to be consistent with this before making any conclusions of whether this doesn't work for you. And by consistent, I mean every day for a month. Unless you're having massive issues with this, then come to me and we'll try to figure it out. But be consistent with it so you can really feel the effects of good hydration and good fueling. So first thing, brick run, 15 or 30 minutes. This is probably our most common type of run in training off the bike. And how many times I hear of athletes, I can't tell you how many times I hear athletes thinking of it as a 15 to 30 minute run, and they don't bring anything with them. But this is running off the bike. So you have to think of it as one long workout. Also, there is a huge difference in terms of how you sweat and the fuel you need when you are running in a very fatigued state off the bike compared to running for 15 minutes fresh. So a brick run is a continuation of that workout. You wouldn't just not drink for the last 30 minutes of your bike ride because you only have 30 minutes left. So we have to see it as one workout. So what do we do for a 15 to 30 minute brick run? About 80 to 100 calories of our sports drink and about 12 to 16 ounces of fluid, at least 250 milligrams of sodium, and then any additional water for cooling. So what does that look like? Well, something like this is about 12 ounces of fluid. So if we have one of these and we have a scoop of scratch in here, that's what we need. But depending on your flask size, if you have something like this, which I think is only about maybe 6 or 7 ounces, you can see that flask size makes a big difference. So you really want to make sure that you have a big enough flask. Now we do have bigger flasks, so we do have something like this that's 20 ounces. And certainly if you put 80 calories in something that's 20 ounces, it's going to be much more dilute, which is fine. But I would actually encourage you guys to have a sports drink and water so you can cool yourself, take a sip, try to get that body temperature controlled as much as possible. So I actually encourage 2 bottles as opposed to just one or a small one. And then you can always use your hydration belt, backpack, whatever it is. I like the Naked just because you've got these little pockets that you can put the flasks in there. Okay. Then, so then we have a brick run of about 30 minutes, or more. So how do we plan for that? We'll break it into small chunks for every 30 minutes of running, 80 to 100 calories, 12 to 16 ounces of fluid, 250 to up to 400 at least milligrams of sodium. So you may need to add a little pinch of salt into that, and then additional water for cooling. So my suggestion is that if you're running for 30 minutes, you have one of these. If you're running for 60 minutes off the bike, I suggest that you have two of these, each with sports nutrition. But you're probably going to want to have water. So you have a few options. You could do one of these and one of these. So this is sports nutrition and this of water. Okay. Or you have one of sports nutrition, one of water to last you about 30 minutes. You do a short loop, you come back to your house or your car, and then I don't have another flask, but let's pretend this is the same size. And then you grab your other flask, you have another one of water. So for the last 30 minutes, you have another sports nutrition and another water. So think about it in small chunks so that you're never rationing your fluids. When you're training in the heat, you always need sports nutrition, but we don't have aid stations when we train. So you're going to want to have water as well to cool yourself. It really does make a big difference. Now, if we have just a standard 60-minute run, again, 80, 100 calories. You can do a little more calories if needed, 12 to 16 ounces of fluid, and 250 to 400 milligrams of sodium for every 30 minutes of running, and then additional water for cooling. Since you will be going into this run much more hydrated, I would suggest that you start with 2 flasks of sports drink. And then let's say it's a 90-minute run. When you're done with 60 minutes, you stop at some kind of water fountain and you fill up another one with sports nutrition and another one with water, because generally at that time you're going to get a little bit hot and you're probably going to want to cool yourself. So you're probably fine to start with 2 of sports nutrition, and then after 60 minutes, go to that sports nutrition and water as if it was a brick run, just because body temperature will go up. Now, if it's up to 60-minute run, same thing, 80, 100 calories, 12 to 16 ounces of fluid, 250 to 400 milligrams of sodium, and additional water for cooling. So it shouldn't be much different than if you were doing a long run. Now, if we think about bike rides, if we're doing an easy bike ride up to 90 minutes, 150 to 200 calories should be just fine. 250 to 400 milligrams of sodium, 24 to 28 ounces of fluid. Now, one thing to consider when it comes to bike is we have different size bottles. So when you have something like this that's 28 ounces, and you have something like this that's maybe 24 ounces, let's say it's 20 ounces, that 8 ounces makes a huge difference. I mean, that could be 10 to 15 minutes of hydration right there. So we want to consider the size of our bottles when we're biking. So really make sure that you think about the bigger the bottle, the better. So 28 ounces is usually our standard bottle that we can find in terms of sports drink. So what are you doing, Kippy? So 28 ounces is ideal. Sports drink should be just fine. So maybe 1 of sports drink and 1 of water. If you're doing a 60-minute to 2-hour ride with some intervals, so what I just said was more of a easy ride. So just a very easy spin, practicing bike handling skills, 1 of 150 to 200 calories of sports drink, and then another 1 of just water. Now, if you're doing a more specific ride in the heat, 60 minutes to 2 hours, we want then about 200 to 240 calories, 400 to 600 milligrams of sodium. So we can get that in our Infinite, maybe add a little bit of salt to that, 28 to 32 ounces of fluid per hour, and then water as needed for sipping and cooling. So up to a 2-hour ride, we'll probably need 2 of these, 200 to 240 calories plus an additional water. So 3 bottles for a 2-hour ride. Now, if you're doing more than 2 hours, so 2 hours, 3 hours, 4-hour ride, you want to start with 2 bottles of sports nutrition, 240 to 280 calories, 400 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium. We need more sodium because we're going to be sweating more because we're out there longer. 28 to 32 ounces of fluid per hour, so our standard sports bottle, plus additional water. So we start with 2 of these, plus an additional bottle of water, and then around 2 hours, we stop and we refill everything, or at least refill what you've already used. So that's very important to refill your bottles about every 2 hours. Solid food is fine just to keep the tummy happy. Wash it down with water, and you can always use that water to cool yourself as well. I suggest to chew the solid food maybe every 30 minutes or so, just to kind of keep the tummy happy. But really make sure that you have bottles. And we also don't want to weigh down our bike, so you don't need to be bringing 4 or 5 bottles with you. It's better just to make short stops or refill at your car or at your house, and 3 bottles, 4 at the most, should be just fine to carry with you. So a few tips. Always sip every 10 to 15 minutes when you are riding or running, and actually more frequently when you're running, because you probably want to drink smaller amounts more frequently. A gulp is about an ounce, so generally we want 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 gulps every time you drink. So on the bike, 4 or 5 big gulp, 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 so you get in about 5 ounces every 10 to 15 minutes, so you can actually finish a bottle per hour. Make sure you stay on a schedule. So don't be riding and then, oh my gosh, it's 45 minutes into my ride and I haven't taken a sip. A lot of athletes set a timer or a reminder to remind them to drink every 10 to 15 minutes. We want to start early, because the earlier you start drinking, the easier it is to empty that from the gut and prevent overheating and a sloshy stomach. Never ration fluids. We've all been guilty of this. Oh, I don't want to stop, or oh, I only have 30 minutes left, but I'm out of all my bottles. Stop before you need to stop. It's so important. And if you think you're saving yourself time by not stopping, you actually do more damage, because it's going to compromise that run off the bike and your recovery. So you may as well stop. And if you think about it, stops, they're short. We don't want them long. 5 minutes is just fine. Grab some water and be on your way. Plan your routes accordingly so you can refill. So when you're riding, if you don't know if there's going to be a gas station open or a water fountain available, do loops, have bottles ready, but really make sure you plan your routes accordingly so you can stop. When Corral and I were doing our long ride this past weekend, our 112 mile, almost 10,000 feet of climbing ride on Saturday, we had planned, I went through 7 bottles in 6.5 hours, and I could have used more in the last half an hour. But we had planned one of our stops at this gas station that we know of. Well, wouldn't you know, the gas station shut down with everything that's been going on. But luckily, there's a golf course across the street, and he let us use his sink so we could refill our bottles, and we both had powder with us, so we were able to refill. We know where a lot of the natural water fountains are in the mountains, so they're kind of popped out of the mountains, so we know where those are, and then gas stations as well. So just make sure that you plan your routes accordingly. Now, with everything going on, you don't know if the water fountains are going to be on or not, so it's better just to stick to the gas stations when you know that they're going to be open. And then lastly, monitor the signs of dehydration. So if you're feeling a headache, fatigue, chills, dark urine, these are definitely signs that you are getting dehydrated and something isn't right. So the best thing to do is to just track what you've been doing for sports nutrition, record it in Training Peaks. Make sure you stay up with all these tips. I'll tell you that the majority of athletes fall short on just not paying attention or underhydrating or underfueling just because it feels like it's an inconvenience. I would rather just go without and just kind of see what happens, but you really have to plan ahead. It's going to benefit you in many ways. Hopefully you found this helpful. I am sure this was very overwhelming, but digest all the info. Maybe watch this again, take some notes again, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay? Take care, everyone.